Pros versus Joes, this was the end of 2005 into 2006. Pros versus Joes was a show on Spike TV. I think they had 5 seasons, and Spike is now what Paramount is. Back then, I was watching Josh Koscheck fight on The Ultimate Fighter in 2004, you know? So this was, I went to, I don't know how I got it. I know I went to a coaching clinic in, I think it was at St. Ed's or something in Ohio, just to get out of teaching for a couple of days, to be honest. And then I got this flyer in the mail. Do you have what it takes to take on the pros? I sent this, like, I was trying to be like confident and cool email, you know, and then it went back and forth, and I ended up getting like these 20-page forms, all these documents, official stuff. And so I went out to California. I've got cast on the show called Pros versus Joes, and it took professional athletes in a variety of sports, mainstream sports, and it pitted them against Joes, average athletes, myself being one of them. And then whichever Joe did the best against the pros, they won. So like, I wasn't expected to be a pro. I just had to do better than the other Joes.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up winning $20,000. And then I got invited back. And then I won a 2005 Dodge Caliber.
Wow.
No, 2006 Dodge Caliber with the cooler up front. That was the hot thing for a minute back then. And then that was like kind of a launching pad. That was a further like, whoa, I can do this now. I've got my mind right. I got a lot of energy. What am I going to do?
How long were you out there, and like how long until the show aired from when you recorded it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I was out there. I was out there twice. And the second one, I think, was for I'm going to say between 3 and 5 days, each one. I did the first one, won the cash, came back. And I mean, 4 or 5 days later, they called me and said, we want to have you back out for the finale, but it's with a partner. So I brought my brother Ben, who wrestled at East Stroudsburg University here in PA. And then we both went out again. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, we filmed in December of 2005. And then I was season 1, episode 9 and 10, and that didn't come out until May. So there was a good 5-6 months. If anyone wants to watch them, if you go on Amazon and type in Pros versus Joe season 1, my episodes are number 9 and 10. It's fun. I
can't wait. I'm going it for my lunch break today.
Yeah, it's fun, man. And I'm from Central PA, and in between Philly and Pittsburgh. And when you get to Western PA, you know, we talk a little bit differently. And so my wife points out how Central PA I sound when we watch those videos, man. It's hilarious.
It's cool because, you know, I had a buddy who actually, him and his dad won the Fear Factor, and it was like 2 years after they did it to when it aired. So that's 6 months isn't too bad, but it's funny because like directly that had no impact on your MMA career. But to me, it seems like it was like a momentum boost, like a confidence, like something impacted you to take that a little bit further. Is that fair to say?
100%. It was a culmination of probably getting older, being bored in my job, seeing Frankie sign, being on Pros versus Joes, understanding the connection of preparation and confidence, and then actually winning on the national screen for like a big prize, because I had talked myself into this negative loop of get there and lose, get there and lose, get there and lose. And then with my last year of college, finishing in the round of 12, I lost to Johnny Hendricks in the round of 12 on my best day. And, you know, if he was injured, maybe I beat him, but probably not. So I left wrestling feeling pretty happy and content about myself. And then being on Pros versus Joes, it was just like, all right, world, what are we going to do?
Man, that's a brutal blood round match, Johnny Hendricks. Who beat Johnny Hendricks? Like, he was in the finals basically every year.
I think he was a 3-time champ, or 2-time champ, 3-time finalist. But that was his freshman year.
Wow, man, it's interesting how like everything just kind of builds, right? And so when you started training MMA, it looks like you were into MMA about 3 years before you made it to the UFC. Were you like teaching and training, or just training?
For a while. So 2006, I think it was my first amateur fights. 2006, I was still teaching. And then I taught all through that spring into the summer of 2007. My first professional fight was the summer of 2007. And then that fall, I enrolled in grad school at East Stroudsburg University. So when I was fighting amateur, I was still teaching. And it was kind of cool. I mean, it was just like the movies. Here Comes the Boom, and then Warrior, I think, is the other one.
Mm-hmm.
But like, yeah, it was just like that. YouTube, like the kids knew what YouTube was, but it's not nearly what it is now, but it was real life version of that.
What were your like teachers saying? Or like, are you out of your freaking mind? Or they thought it was cool?
Most half and half, probably.
Yeah.
Most people, the thing I tell is the people around town, people my parents would see at Sam's Club or Walmart or the gas station, what is he doing? He is crazy. And then I think my dad would always, especially with wrestling stuff, just supportive, like intelligently supportive, right? Like make sure I'm doing it the right way, etc. And then I think my mom just was blissfully unaware of fighting, because I went home one day. So I saw Frankie sign to fight, and then I went home, called my buddy, and I was like, hey man, I'm going to fight in the UFC. And like that conviction set it in stone. And then I told my parents, and the only thing my mom said was, okay, well, just get your graduate degree in between. And I was like, okay. Like thinking she has no idea what I'm talking about. She doesn't know what this thing is, because she would have never been that like cooperative toward it. But yeah, that's kind of what set it all in motion.
And then how did you go about like the training? I mean, because to make it to the UFC is the elite of the elite. I mean, obviously, and so great wrestling career, but did you start doing like Muay Thai or Jiu-Jitsu? Like, what was the training like to make that kind of jump?
Yeah, so I started in my hometown, middle of Pennsylvania. I started in my hometown with some Muay Thai and some Jiu-Jitsu just to get my feet wet. And then when I went to grad school, I started training. I would commute over to Philadelphia. It's almost a 2-hour commute, but I would train with Eddie Alvarez.
2 hours?
Yeah, I wouldn't do it every day. I do it a couple times a week, but I would go to Fight Factory in Philly, and Eddie Alvarez and Zach Makovsky and some other stud fighters are from there. And then eventually I connected with, I was just, as in wrestling, as in speaking, as in acquiring a second language, I'm like, who can I connect with? Who can I go to? Who's the best? How can I get on their radar?
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that with Frankie. I did that with Eddie and Frankie. And then I would just meet, and this was when Frankie was in the UFC, but I would just, again, I'd drive 2-3 hours in Jersey. Traffic is terrible. But I would train with him and a guy named Chris Ligori. And Frankie at that time was still kind of bootstrapping his training as well. And I served a role as being a hard-nosed wrestler that would just show up and train hard, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And then little by little, I would get connected through Frankie to Ricardo Almeida's gym, Henzo Gracie in New York. I trained at AMA Fight Club, which is home to Jim Miller, who's still fighting in the UFC. He's got and the most wins in the UFC, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of hodgepodging, putting together the training. But yeah, I would train wrestling for sure, because that base wise of cardio and not getting tired. And then, yeah, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, boxing, you name it, we were training it. And it's a little bit of a callback to what we were talking about earlier with the confidence. I was so afraid of fighting, right? Because as a kid in elementary and middle school, there was this group of kids who would always just like, Charlie's the goody, let's threaten them constantly, all day, every day. And
it's like bowling, kind of, or legit bowling. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and I tell the kids that in school, and like how you respond to it kind of dictates where you go. And so I was so afraid of fighting growing up. And so professional fighting, I was so afraid of getting tired. And then that fear drove me to train at a level that I never did when wrestling. Because if you get tired wrestling, you just get tired wrestling, and then they just, drive you into the mat, but they're not kicking and punching and beating up. So that level of fear in fighting really drove me to an obsessive level of being in shape.
And was it a lot of like running, or was it just fighting and that kind of thing to get you in shape?
Everything. Yeah, strength and conditioning, fighting, rounds, Shark Tank. Eddie Alvarez taught me a treadmill workout. I call it death by treadmill, but he calls it 10 and 10s. And it was 10% incline, 10 miles per hour, 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. And you do 3 5-minute rounds of that. So,
oh my God,
if anyone wants to give that a try, give it a try. And if I could, so my litmus test, maybe like 3 weeks before, I would start doing that twice a week so that by the end, like a week before my fight, I could do it without resting, without stopping. And that told me, okay, you're in shape.
What, you would sprint nonstop like that?
But it's 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off.
Right.
For 3 5-minute rounds.
Yeah.
And I would do that successfully.
Wow.
Yeah. It's hell. It's death by treadmill. It's very
Sounds
difficult.
brutal. So
It's
how many
fun.
fights did you have before the UFC came calling?
I think I was 11-1, 10-1 or 11-1.
And how did that work out going to that jump?
Yeah. So I started out local, New Jersey, couple fights, and then they sanctioned it in Pennsylvania. So then I fought basically in my hometown, which was awesome because I'd have, selling tickets is how you made a lot of your money. So I would sell a couple hundred tickets and it was just awesome. It's like being the hero in your own hometown. It was so cool.
Yeah.
And then getting the call of the UFC, for me, I didn't have, and maybe it was because of wrestling, I don't know, but I didn't have really any UFC jitters. I had been like on center stage wrestling and Pros versus Joes. But the realness of it, I do specifically remember my first UFC fight in Charlotte. I remember walking around that afternoon with my now wife, maybe even my then wife. I don't think it was. I think it was 2 years before we got married. But it did hit me like, wow, I'm getting in a fist fight tonight in an arena with another guy who's trying to beat me up, and it was a pretty lonely feeling.